live. What's up, YouTube? I was running late because I was getting ready and I spilled the whole bag of chips, pretzel chips, on the floor. I'm not happy about it. I'm trying to sketch my Vintage Carnival related content. You know, my rides, my bumper cars, my associated bumper cars. I had had a roller coaster car on there. I'm just trying out some different content before I paint another piece. Always good to, keep drawing. And in addition, it's always good to work out your ideas before you actually get out on the wall. Always good. Good idea. Good idea. So anyway, if you see, you tune into the video. You want to make a comment, put a replay in. Like the kids say, like and subscribe. And enjoy is what I'd say for the most part. Let's see here.
Of many people's lived reality, and that this reality extends into the workplace. Whether in tech or finance, sports, or the service industry, every day we seem to hear another story about an abuse of power or another grossly inappropriate workplace behavior. People are furious. They're taking to Twitter and social media to voice that this must change. But it's time to move beyond the hashtag. It's time for us to report harassment and discrimination to those who can fix this mess. And it's time for us to talk about harassment in a more inclusive way. Not just about sexual harassment, but to encourage people to come forward about harassment and discrimination based on other characteristics, such as age, disability, or ethnicity. Because only together can we fix the underlying causes and consequences of harassment. You see, most of us will at some point in our lives experience workplace harassment or discrimination. Research shows that particularly women, people of color, and people who openly identify as LGBTQI are likely to be targeted.
Oh, they done added an I,
y'all. A persistent part of their reality. And for most of these people, 98%, according to some studies, most of these people will never speak up and tell their employer. Too often, harassment and discrimination is a lonely and isolating experience. But we need to help people out from under their desks. We need to empower people to have a voice. The reasonable first question that everybody asks when I've been asked is, what do I do now? And this is what I want to help you with. Navigating the barriers to reporting can be absolutely easy. How can we speak up in a society that too often discredits or diminishes our experiences? How can we speak up in a society that is likely to be retributive towards us? How can we deal with the silencing that goes on all around us? Making matters worse, often our memories are the only evidence we have of what happened. Now here's where I can come in. I'm a memory scientist, and I specialize in how we remember important and emotional events. I've particularly focused on how the memory interview process can severely impact the evidentiary quality of reports that we produce. A bad interview can lead you to forget details or misremember them, while a good interview can forever change your life for the better. After looking at lab reports and studying this issue, both in the courtroom and in research settings, I've dissected all the different things that can go wrong with our memories that can really threaten your case And now I'm turning my attention to helping people tackle recording and reporting of workplace harassment and discrimination. There's 3 things that I've learned from my research on this that you can immediately apply if you've been harassed or discriminated against at work. I want to help you turn your memory into evidence. Evidence that even a memory skeptic like me is unlikely to find fault with. First of all, James Comey had it right. The former head of the FBI used to sit in his car, lock himself in after meetings with the president, and write down absolutely everything he could remember about what happened. The now famous recordings have proved to be quite useful later on. Be like Comey. Now you don't need to lock yourself into your car to do this, but please, immediately after something happens, I want you to contemporaneously record what happened. And do this before talking to anyone else about it. Because as soon as you share your story with friends or family or colleagues or therapists, you have the potential to distort or change your memory of the event. Uncontaminated, contemporaneous evidence is worth gold. Second, the type of evidence matters. Sure, you can do a handwritten note of what happened, but how do you prove when you wrote it? Instead, pull out your computer or smartphone and make a note that's time-stamped, where you can prove this was recorded at this time. Contemporaneous time-stamped evidence is better. Finally, make sure what you're writing down is actually relevant. Too often we see that people bring out Facebook messages, they bring out time-stamped pieces of evidence, but sure, they're not particularly relevant, they're not particularly useful. It's easy to write an emotional, unstructured account of what happened, understandable because it's an emotional experience. But those might not actually be the details that matter later on for an investigation. Write down this list. I want you to keep track of this and simply fill in the blanks. First of all, what happened? In as much detail as possible, describe the situation and do it on the day it happened if at all possible. Second, who was there? Were there any witnesses? This becomes crucial potentially later on.
Yeah.
What exact time and date? What location? Where did this happen? Who did you tell after the event? How did it make you feel during and after it happened? And is there any other evidence, such as WhatsApp, photos, or emails that might lend more credibility to your case? These are all details that are incredibly easy to report to radio. They're also incredibly easy to get later on. Humans, according to research, often overestimate their ability to remember important emotional details later on. Assume that you're going to forget. Assume you have to write it down. Now, these 3 pieces of advice are a good start, but of course they don't overcome a lot of the other barriers to reporting. According to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which published a report in 2018, there's one key recommendation to overcome some of the other fears often associated with reporting these kinds of incidents to your employer. One piece of advice that they made, have an online anonymous reporting tool. Only that way, they say, can you truly overcome many of the fears associated with reporting. Now, in line with this, and informed by what was happening all around me, and taking and applying the memory science, the science that I've been doing for many years, I sat down with a number of people and we together created talktospot.com. Spot is an online anonymous reporting tool that helps you record and report workplace harassment and discrimination. It allows you to do it anonymously, it allows you to do it for free, and it's completely evidence-based. You don't have to talk to a person, there's no fear of judgment, and you can do it whenever and wherever you need. Now you have the power to walk through an evidence-based memory interview. Now this is called a cognitive interview. This is the same technique that police use when they're doing their job properly. So best case scenarios, people who are being asked about important emotional events are being asked in line with the cognitive interview. Now this walks you through all the relevant information so that at the end, after you talk to the bot, which is an automatic messaging system, after you talk to the bot, it generates a PDF record that's timestamped and securely signed that you can keep for yourself as evidence in case you want to share it later, or you can submit it to your employer right away. And in line with recommendations, you can submit it to your employer anonymously. But a reporting tool is only as useful as the audience that's listening. So if your employer is truly committed to change, we've decided to also offer them the tools to respond. So if organizations work with us and are truly committed to doing something about workplace harassment and discrimination, they're also able to respond to you even if you chose to stay anonymously. We think it's important that you can work together with your employer to tackle this issue. We think that everybody wins when we bring light into this dark issue. Whether it happens to you or to someone you know, recording and reporting what happened can really improve how we talk about these issues. And if you're an organization, this is a call to give your employees access to better and more effective reporting mechanisms. We know that the current methods that are used in most organizations don't work effectively. It's time to change that if you're committed to inclusion and diversity. It's time for us to celebrate our diversity. It's time for us to give a voice to those who have for too long been denied one. It's time for us to celebrate those who come forward, even if they feel they need to stay anonymous, to stay masked, to do so. It's time for a reporting revolution. Thank you.
It's clear in the white Cherokee expiration March of 23 up in Haven. Would you come under 20? Did you the road at 4 and I-40?
That is some cornball shit right there. That is some goofball shit right there, boy. Yes, it is. I gotta tilt up just a little bit, it looks like.
Two 2207.
I'm just gonna forget about the fact that I dropped all of these on the floor. They eat them anyway.
iPhone, why did you pick your current partner? And why did so many people vote for Donald Trump? What were the reasons? Why did they do it? So we ask this kind of question all the time and we expect to get an answer. And when being asked, we expect ourselves to know the answer, to simply tell why we did as we did. But do we really know why? So when you say that you prefer George Clooney to Tom Hanks due to his concern for the environment, is that really true? You can be perfectly sincere and genuinely believe that this is the reason to drive your choice, but to me, it may still feel like something is missing. As it stands, due to the nature of subjectivity, it is actually very hard to ever prove that people are wrong about themselves. So I'm an experimental psychologist, and this is the problem we've been trying to solve in our lab. So we wanted to create an experiment that would allow us to challenge what people say about themselves, regardless of how certain they may seem. But tricking people about their own minds is hard. So we turned to professionals, the magicians. So they're experts at creating the illusion of a free choice. So when they say, pick a card, any card, the only thing you know is that your choice is no longer free. So we had a few fantastic brainstorming sessions with a group of Swedish magicians and helped us create a method in which we would be able to manipulate the outcome of people's choices. This way we would know when people are wrong about themselves, even if they don't know this themselves. So I will now show you a short movie just showing this manipulation. So it's quite simple. So the participants make a choice, but I end up giving them the opposite. And then we want to see how do they react and what do they say. So it's quite simple, but see if you can spot the magic going on. And this was shot for green participants, so they don't know what's going on. Hi, my name is Ted. I'm going to show you pictures like this, and you'll have to decide which one you find more attractive.
Okay.
And then sometimes I will ask you why you prefer
And 32.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Picture part. 605 West Phoenix.
What do you prefer?
Or a 917 person. And a 10 and 30. 27, everybody.
Okay, this one just felt interesting.
I don't know. The exam is not supposed to be there. It's where it's like.
The guy wants to trick.
Hearing green back, it's like 9:15. How about you, Tyler?
So they get the opposite of their choice. And let's see what happens.
He seems a little more innocent than I
He does.
One on the left. I like the smile, contour of the nose and face. So it's a little more interesting to me than the haircut.
This one. That's a smoky look better.
The light is smoky look better.
This one.
What made you choose him?
I don't know, it looks a little bit like the Hobbit.
And what happens in the end when I tell them the true nature of the experiment? Yeah, that's it. Jason, I have to ask a few questions. What did you think of this experiment? Was it easy or hard?
Oh, it was easy.
Easy, yeah. During the experiments, I actually switched the pictures a few times. Was this anything you noticed?
No, I didn't notice any. Switching the pictures as far as
Yeah, you were pointing at one of them, but I actually gave you the opposite.
the opposite one. Okay, no, so
Did you notice that sometimes during the experiment, I switched the pictures?
Yeah, I did not notice that.
So you were pointing at one, but then I gave you the other one. No explanation of that happening.
Yeah. I did not notice.
Thank you. Okay, so as you probably figure out now, the trick is that I have two cards in each hand, and when I hand one of them over, the black one kind of disappears into the black surface. So using pictures like this, normally not more than 20% of the participants detect these trends. And as you saw in the movie, when in the end we explain what's going on, they're very surprised and often refuse to believe that a trick has been made. So this shows that this effect is quite robust and a genuine effect. If you're interested in self-knowledge, as I am, the more interesting bit is, okay, so what do they say when they explain these choices? So we've done a lot of analysis of the verbal reports in these experiments. This graph simply shows that if you compare what they say in a manipulated trial and with a non-manipulated trial, that is, when they explain a choice, a non-choice they've made and one where we manipulated the outcome, we find that they are remarkably similar. So they are just as emotional, just as specific, and they are expressed with the same level of certainty. So the strong conclusion to draw from this, that if there are no differences between a real choice and a manipulated choice, perhaps we make things up all the time. But we've also done studies where we try to match what they say with the actual cases. And then we find things like this. So here, this male participant, he preferred the girl to the left, he ended up with the one to the right, and then he explained his choice like this. So she's radiant. I would rather have approached her at the bar than the other one, and I like earrings. And whatever made him choose the girl on the left to begin with, it can't have been the earrings, because they were actually sitting on the girl to the right. So this is a clear example of the post hoc constructions. So they just explain the choice afterwards. So what this experiment showed is, okay, so if we fail to detect that our choices have been changed, we will immediately start to explain them in another way. And what we also found is that the participants often come to prefer the alternative that they were led to believe they liked. So if we let them do the choice again, they will now choose the face they had previously rejected. So this is the effect we call choice blindness. And we've done a number of different studies.
Choice blindness.
Consumer choices, choices based on taste and smell, and even reasoning problems. But what you all want to know is, of course, does this extend also to more complex, more meaningful choices, like those concerning moral and political issues? So the next experiment, it needs a little bit of background. So in Sweden, the political landscape is dominated by a left-wing and a right-wing coalition. And the voters may move a little bit between the parties within each coalition, but there's very little movement between the coalitions. And before each elections, the newspapers and the polling institutes, they put together what they call an election compass, which consists of a number of dividing issues that sort of separates the two coalitions. Things like if tax on gasoline should be increased, or if the 13 months of paid parental leave should be split equally between the two parents in order to increase gender equality. So before the last Swedish election, we created an election compass of our own. So we walked up to people in the street and asked if they wanted to do a quick political survey. So first we had them state their voting intention between the two coalitions. Then we asked them to answer 12 of these questions, and they would fill in their answers. And then we would ask them to discuss, so okay, so why do you think tax on gas should be increased? And we go through the questions. Then we had a color-coded template that would allow us to tally their overall score. So this person would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 scores to the left. So he would lean to the left, basically. And in the end, we also had them fill in their voting intention once more. But of course, there was also a trick involved. So first, we walked up to people, we asked them about their voting intention, and then when they started filling, we would fill in a set of answers going in the opposite direction. We would put it under the notepad, and when we get the questionnaire, we will simply glue it on top of the participant's own answer. So there it's gone. And then we would ask about each of the questions. So how did you reason here? and they'll state the reasons. Together we will sum up their overall score,
Mm-hmm.
and in the end, they will state their voting intention again. So what we find, first of all, here is that very few of these manipulations are detected. And they're not detected in the sense that they realize, okay, you must have changed my answer. It's more the case that, okay, I must have misunderstood the question the first time I read it. Can I please change it? And even if a few of these manipulations were changed, the overall majority was missed. So we managed to trace 90% of the participants' answers from left to right to left, their overall profile. And what happens then when they are asked
The new
to motivate
fish
their choices?
beer.
And here we find
Fish
much more
flavored
interesting verbal
beer.
reports.
I invented it right
People say
now.
things like this. I'll read it to you. So, large-scale governmental surveillance of email and internet traffic ought to be permissible as means to combat international crime and terrorism. Do you agree to some extent with this statement? Yes. So how did you reason here? Well, as it is so hard to get at international crime and terrorism, I think there should be those kinds of tools. And then the person remembers an argument from the newspaper in the morning. Like in the newspaper today, it said they can listen to mobile phones from prison if the gang leader tries to continue his crime from inside. And I think it's a madness that we have so little power that we can't stop those things there when we actually have the possibility to do so. And then it's a little bit back and forth again. So I don't like that I have access to everything I do, but I still think it's worth it in the long run. See, this person, if you didn't know that this person just took part in a choice balance experiment, I don't think you would have questioned that this is the true sort of attitude of that person. But what happens again with voting intention? What we find that one is also clearly affected by the questionnaire. So we have 10 participants shifting from left to right or from right to left. We have another 19 that go from clear voting intention to being uncertain. Some go from being uncertain to clear voting intention. And then there's a number of participants staying uncertain throughout. And that number is interesting because if you look at what the polling institutes say at the closer you get to an election, the only people that are sort of in play are the ones that are considered uncertain. But we show that is a much larger number that would actually consider shifting their attitudes. And here I must point out, of course, that you are not allowed to use this as an actual method to change people's votes sort of before an election, and that we clearly we debrief them afterwards and give them every opportunity to change back to whatever they thought first. But what this shows is that if you can get people to see the opposite view and engage in a sort of conversation with themselves, that could actually make them change the views. Okay. So what does it all mean? What do I think is going on here? So first of all, a lot of what we call self-knowledge is actually self-interpretation. So I see myself make a choice, and then I try to, when I'm asked why, I just try to make as much sense of it as possible when I make an explanation. But we do this so quick and with such ease that we think we actually know the answer when we ask why, when we answer why. And as it is an interpretation, of course, we sometimes make mistakes, the same way we make mistakes when we try to understand other people. So beware when you ask people the question why, because what may happen is that if you ask them so why do you support this issue? Why do you stay in this job or in this relationship? What may happen when you ask why is that you actually create an attitude that wasn't there before you asked the question. And this is, of course, important in your professional life as well, or could be. If, say, you design something, then you ask people, so why do you think this is good or bad? Or if you're a journalist, asking a politician, so why did you make this decision? Or if indeed you are a politician and try to explain why some decision was made. So this may all seem a bit disturbing, but if you want to look at it from a positive direction, it could be seen as showing, okay, so we're actually a little bit more flexible than we think. We can change our minds. Our attitudes are not set in stone. And we can also change the minds of others. if we can only get them to engage with the issue and see it from the opposite view. And in my own personal life, since starting with this research, so my partner and I, we've always had the rule that you're allowed to take things back. So just because I said I liked something a year ago, it doesn't mean I have to like it still. And getting rid of the need to stay consistent is actually a huge relief that makes relational life so much easier to live. Anyway, so the conclusion must be, know that you don't know yourself, or at least not as well as you think you do. Thanks.
Yeah. Be really big. That could be actually kind of crazy because a fish in one, we could mash a chicken in another one. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, 46. Thank you, 46, going today, narcotics violation, report AUR, 22, They want 22, 24.
We could do the fishing. Huh. That could be good. Because we could do a fish in one, a shrimp in the other, and the chicken holding on. Bunch of these. Think about this. Let me think about this. I'm off track now. Let's see here. So if we could, that's this right here. That's circle right there, so that should work fine.
Developed an inventory of the most distressing human experiences that we could have. Number one on the list, death of a spouse. 2, divorce. 3, marital separation. Now, generally, but not always, for those 3 to occur, we need what comes in number 7 on the list, which is marriage. 4th on the list is imprisonment in an institution. Now, some say number 7 has been counted twice. I don't believe that. When the low stress inventory was built, back then, a long-term relationship pretty much equated to a marriage. Not so now. So for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to be including de facto relationships, common law marriages, and same-sex marriages. Or same-sex relationships soon hopefully to become marriage. And I can say from my work with same-sex couples, the principles I'm about to talk about are no different. They're the same across all relationships. So in a modern society, we know that prevention is better than cure. We vaccinate against polio, diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, measles. We have awareness campaigns for melanoma, stroke, diabetes. All important campaigns. But none of those conditions come close to affecting 45% of us. 45%, that's our current divorce rate. Why no prevention campaign for divorce? Well, I think it's because our policymakers don't believe that things like attraction and the way relationships are built is changeable or educable. Why? Well, our policymakers currently are Generation X. They're in their 30s to 50s. And when I'm talking to these guys about these issues, I see their eyes glaze over and I can see them thinking, doesn't this crazy psychiatrist get it? You can't control the way in which people attract other people and build relationships. Not so our dear millennials. This is the most information-connected, analytical, and skeptical generation, making the most informed decisions of any generation before them. And when I talk to millennials, I get a very different reaction. They actually want to hear about this. They want to know about how do we have relationships that last. So, for those of you who want to embrace the post-romantic destiny era with me, let me talk about my 3 life hacks for preventing divorce. Now, we can intervene to prevent divorce 2 points later. Once the cracks begin to appear and establish a relationship, or
Just
early,
before we jump off and see.
commit before we have children.
Okay.
And that's what I'm going to take us.
Alright, so
So, my first life hack.
this is our glass.
Millennials spend 7+ hours on their devices a day. The very
Glass here.
And some say, probably not unreasonably, this is probably
And actually, no.
their face-to-face
I should
relationship.
use the glass.
Indeed, and add to that the hookup culture, go apps like Tinder, and it's no great surprise that the 20-somethings that I work with will often talk to me about how it is often easier for them to have sex with somebody that they've met than have a meaningful conversation. Now, some say this is a bad thing. I say this is a really good thing. It's a particularly good thing to be having sex outside of the institution of marriage. Now, before you go and get all moral on this, remember the Generation X, the American Public Report, they found that 91% of women had had premarital sex by the age of 30. 91%. It's a particularly good thing that these relationships are happening later. See, boomers in the 60s, they were getting married at an average age for women of 20 and 23 for men. 2015 in Australia, that is now 30 for women and 32 for men. That's a good thing because the older you are when you get married, the lower your divorce rate. Why? Why is it helpful to get married later? 3 reasons. Firstly, getting married later allows the other 2 preventers of divorce to come into play. They are tertiary education and a higher income, which tends to go with tertiary education. So these 3 factors all kind of get mixed up together. Number 2, neuroplasticity research tells us that the human brain is still growing until at least the age of 25. So that means how you're thinking and what you're thinking is still changing up until 25. Thirdly, and most importantly to my mind, is personality. Your personality at the age of 20 does not correlate with your personality at the age of 50. But your personality at the age of 30 does correlate with your personality at the age of 50. So when I ask somebody who got married young why they broke up, and they say, we grew apart, they're being surprisingly accurate because the 20s is a decade of rapid change and maturation. So The first thing you want to get before you get married is older. Number two, John Gottman, psychologist and relationship researcher, can tell us many factors that correlate with a happy, successful marriage. But the one that I want to talk about is a big one. 81% of marriages implode, self-destruct, if this problem is present. The second reason why I want to talk about it here is because it's something you can evaluate while you're dating. Gottman found that the relationships that were most stable and happy over the longer term were relationships in which the couple shared power. They were influenceable. Big decisions like buying a house, overseas trip, buying a car, having children. But when Gottman drilled down on this data, what he found was that women were generally pretty influenceable. Guess where the problem lay?
With them.
Yeah, there's only two options here, isn't there? Yeah, we men were to blame.
Yeah.
The other thing that Gottman found is that men who are influenceable also tended to be, quote, outstanding fathers, unquote. So women, how influenceable is your man? Men, you're with it because you respect it. Make sure that respect plays out in the decision-making process.
Mm-hmm.
Number three.
That has
I'm often intrigued by why couples come in to see me after they've been married for 30 or 40 years. This is a time when they're approaching the infirmities and illness of old age. It's a time when they're particularly focused on caring for each other.
Where's my G-King?
They'll forgive things that have bugged them for years. They'll forgive old betrayals, even infidelities, because they're focused on caring for each other. So what pulls them apart? The best word I have for this is reliability, or the lack thereof. Does your partner have your back? It takes two forms. Firstly, can you rely on your partner to do what they say they're going to do? Do they follow through? Secondly, if, for example, you're out and you're being verbally attacked by somebody, or you're suffering from a really disabling illness, does your partner step up and do what needs to be done to leave you feeling cared for and protected? And here's the rub. If you're facing old age and your partner isn't doing that for you, in fact, you're having to do that for them, then in an already fragile relationship, it can look a bit like you might be better off out of it rather than in it. So, is your partner there for you when it really matters? Not all the time, 80% of the time, but particularly if it's important to you. On your side, think carefully before you commit to do something for your partner. It is much better to commit to as much as you can follow through than to commit to more sound good in the moment and then let them down. And if it's really important to your partner and you commit to it, make sure you move hell and high water to follow through. Now, these are things that I'm saying you can look for. Don't worry, these are also things that can be built in existing relationships. I believe that the most important decision that you can make is who you choose as a life partner, who you choose as the other parent of your children. And of course, romance has to be there. Romance is a grand and beautiful and quirky thing. But we need to add to a romantic, loving heart an informed, thoughtful mind as we make the most important decision of our life.
I'm a mash a fish, a chicken, and a shrimp in a beer. That's crazy. Y'all are crazy. All right. That is really, really a very Jay Hudson thing to do. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. I am for real. Yeah. Okay. We could. We getting close. All right. All right, YouTube. I'm packing it in. That's enough of that. Thanks for tuning in.